Home is now.
All righty. Hello, hello, Gabriel. Good morning. How's it going?
Pretty good, Jolene. How about yourself?
I'm doing amazing. Thank you so much for asking. Gabriel, I would love for you to kickstart our interview if you don't mind. Tell me a little bit about your professional experience.
Yeah, for sure. So for about the last 5 to 7 years, I've spent most of my time in the C-suite space, specifically at Microsoft, just supporting various GMs, CVPs, and just kind of lead techs in that space. So I've worked with various teams from the SELA team, which is the Microsoft legal team, to kind of their cloud and industry and cloud team that kind of works with small to medium businesses. So, long story short, I've worked with a lot of teams. I've gained a lot of experience. I'm just kind of being in those meetings with with stakeholders, and like I mentioned earlier, GMs, and this as far as that's concerned, project managers, engineers, kind of all that space. So. I'm definitely Scrum adjacent. I do have the Scrum certification, PS1. So that's something that I'm kind of endeavoring a little bit more so towards after my EA thing is kind of, you know, said and done as far as that's concerned. So I'd say I'm definitely an executive administrative assistant kind of slash project manager, so to speak. So I do have those skills as far as that's concerned. Pretty good, like I said, working with big teams in the corporate space, but also small teams and smaller, smaller spaces as far as that's concerned. So, yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you for that introduction. It was incredible. Now, I have your resume pulled up here, Gabriel, and I can see that you've been working as a executive administrative assistant for the last 7 to 8 years or so, perhaps more. And you first started off as an admin assistant back in 2014. Now, at your latest role, or you even mentioned during your intro that you had been able to kind of be under a few C-suite personnel as an executive assistant. How many people did you have that you were their assistants? Was it one executive, two, or how many people?
So typically, I would have about
Mhm.
three executives that I would manage. Usually two at the GM level, and then maybe a third, senior program manager, just kind of a senior, kind of a third senior, kind of adjacent to that C-suite level. So that's kind of the expectation as far as that's concerned. Of the organization that I supported, usually have hundreds, if not thousands, of people that sit underneath just those three executives. So I'd be supporting anybody from Lebanon to America to France to Singapore, right? So I'm definitely experienced with the just different time zones of kind of managing meetings as far as that's concerned. Just recurring schedules, things like that.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned something that I was going to ask you as well, as far as your organization managing those calendars, right? You were managing three executives. So
Yeah.
when it comes down to perhaps, those any conflicts when it comes down to scheduling, how did you handle that?
The best way that I would handle situations like that is that I would just make sure that I have a cadence with each of my executives every week. It was at least once a week, sometimes, twice a week, maybe if there's just ad hoc events or conflicts that just pop up out of the blue. So I'm usually pretty proactive about dealing with that in our weekly meetings, saying, hey, look, the next 2 to 3 weeks, we got XYZ going out. So there's really never any big conflicts or anything that kind of just doesn't come on the schedule unannounced. I always like to tell people I think the EAs are kind of like the guardians of the calendar, so to speak. You kind of decide what goes where. And so I like to think that it's very hard for stuff to sneak up on you if you have control of the calendar and you can just see who's sending meetings and invitations and things like that. So I say 90% of the time, it's pretty easy to mitigate most of those conflicts just by having, consistent cadences and meetings with your executives. And then also just, just having a little bit of proactiveness to just reach out if something looks fishy or something looks, not right or what as far as that's concerned.
Absolutely. And I think having a cadence is going to be key, especially in the EA role, right? You can't read their minds. And so kind of got to go to them for some answers. Now, as far as systems that you have used, obviously you've used the calendar nonetheless, but what are some systems that you have used in the past?
Yeah, so I'm pretty proficient with the Microsoft suite. I naturally haven't been there for 5 to 6 years, but I'm pretty familiar with the Google suite as well. So I know it's like Sheets and Docs and all that stuff. So I know how to use that as well. So I'm on both sides of the spectrum. I'm pretty familiar. Other than that, just like other project management tools like Asana and Jira and just like those PM like more like I mentioned earlier, like Scrum adjacent things where you're doing like feature planning and you're working with like engineering teams and like those types of methodologies, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. Now, I know in the beginning of the call, you mentioned, the project management side of things. So have you worked in a position such as, the project manager role? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so as an EA, I have been responsible for budget for various things and working with the chief of staff, whether it's for like morale events and they say, hey, we want to do like a bunch of Microsoft team sweaters with like the year and the date of the event, or hey, we want to do like something like, oh, we want to do like a trip to Microsoft New York or something like that. Just planning morale and budget was something that I was responsible for, which is definitely within the PM scope. So as far as that's concerned, really just making sure that I'm working with the chief of staff and getting anything approved because they kind of have the final stamp on yay or nay, and just kind of making sure that we're not going crazy, but that we're just using spend appropriately since it doesn't roll over, and just kind of being cognitive and aware of that, and having a cadence as well with like the other EAs and the chief of staff. We would kind of have like a monthly meeting and talk about budget, talk about any concerns we have with the org or just anything that needs to be brought up. And usually that would be times we would usually go over like in-depth budget, procurement, things like that.
Mhm. Absolutely. And that's amazing to hear that you have done that project manager from the beginning and also collaborating with the other EAs to successfully and complete that project. So that's amazing in itself. Now, I want to know because as far as your work ethic, let's say I was to connect with a previous employer and I were to ask them, how would you describe Gabriel's work ethic? What do you think they would say about you?
I would think say that I'm a pretty pragmatic person that takes initiative most of the time. I don't always have the answer, but I'm always good about finding the answer, and I feel like that's 90% of the time, the battle most of the time. The information is available. You just have to go seek it, right? And so I think it's just having the wherewithal to just be consistent, just kind of can be consistent and trying to be a problem solver. And that's just really what I feel like working at Microsoft has kind of taught me. You just have to have an ability to just solve problems consistently and not really always have the answers, but just know how to look for the answers.
Absolutely. And using your resources, right? So
Irresponsible.
that's definitely key. Well, Gabriel, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up our interview here. I want to thank you once again for the time that we spent together and giving me all the details that was needed for this interview. So thank you for that once again.
Yeah, of course. Anytime, Darlene. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I do want to ask you, Gabriel, stick on the line with me really quickly. I want to chat with you.